Greetings to you all, our viewers and listeners, from wherever you're tuned in to the TIHA Archival Conversations. My name is Victor Mukasa, and I am your host on the conversations. These conversations are brought to you by Trans and Intersex History Africa, TIHA, where, for those of you who have just joined us for the first time, this is the space where we collect, we document, we archive, we keep safe the histories, the legacies, the experiences of trans and intersex Africans, both on the continent and in the diaspora over the years. It is an ongoing piece of work, a piece of work that we are indeed proud and honored to be doing. Now, these archival conversations, again, for you who is just joining us for the first time, take place every Friday at 3 p.m. West African time, 4 p.m. South African time, 5 p.m. East African time. And for those on the East Coast of the US, it is 10 a.m. East African time. It means everybody can find where you actually, what time it is that we come here every Friday. And then you can also find most of the collections, this wealth of archives, on our website, which is trans and intersex history.africa. Trans and intersex history.africa. You can find a lot of the histories of trans and intersex Africans kept safe there. Now, today we celebrate. It's a celebration. Well, it's a celebration. We celebrate a very historic moment. And that is if you have a vuvuzela, you have a trumpet, you have a drum, this is the moment to drum it. 20 years of gender dynamics. Now, Gender DynamiX is South Africa's first trans and gender diverse organization, and indeed a true trailblazer on the continent of Africa. Every time we are featuring the stories of so many trans people across and intersex people across Africa, the name Gender DynamiX, or those who worked at Gender DynamiX, like Liesl Theron, who is usually here, will be cited. So it is 20 years of Gender DynamiX. Now, because of that, we are having two very special people that are going to take us down the lane to when Gender DynamiX started. Today we welcome two executive directors, one legacy, but so many voices. Please welcome to the studio Liesl Theron, the founding director of Gender DynamiX. Liesl Theron, the founding director of Gender DynamiX, and Liberty Matthyse. And I ask you to forgive me, Liberty, if I mispronounce that name. You correct it for me. Welcome to the show. Liberty is the current executive director of Gender DynamiX. Happy birthday to you both. Happy birthday to all those that you carry with you to this show. And please say hi to our audiences.
Perfect.
Liesl.
I would like to really say thank you to all the listeners for tuning in from wherever you are. Some people might have some surprises during the show, or have news they didn't know, information they didn't know, or will be well familiar with the story and parts of the story maybe, and just be happy to be here with us celebrating. So until later, I say for good, for health, and for all of our good luck. Welcome.
Thank you, Liesl. Liberty, that's you next.
Perfect. Good day, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning into the show today, and also for celebrating one of the conversations that we're going to be having in reflecting on the big momentous moment that Gender Dynamics is celebrating, which is our 20th anniversary. I just want to say thank you, Liesl, thank you, Victor, for also having us on the show, for having me on the show, speaking a little bit about the organization. You two are two activists that have greatly inspired me in my journey And so I feel really honored to be sharing this space with you today. And of course, GDX and TIA has a strong partnership. And so for me, that is also quite a key moment for us to be here and also linking that partnership in a real and in a meaningful way. I look forward to the conversation that lays ahead of us.
Thank you so much, Liberty. And that brings us to again that moment where we thank those who support the work at TIHA. Gender dynamics, again. Every time it's gender dynamics, and that is why it is important for you to understand why gender dynamics does not miss a segment. Gender dynamics, thank you so much for the support that you give to Trans and Intersex History Africa, the other foundation, Astra Foundation. We thank you for the support that you give to TIHA in order for this work to be done and for our histories to be documented. Happy birthday again. It is celebrated. Those who are listening in, please share this live stream with others. I see that in the comments section. I don't know if that's YouTube or Facebook. People are already saying happy birthday. So let us continue in that spirit. Now, to you, Liesl, to you, Liberty, to the staff of Gender Dynamics, past and present, and even the future, since this will be a living element, and all the supporters, all those who have benefited from Gender Dynamics, all those who feel Gender Dynamics is home. I have today a very, very special a very special surprise for you. Something that might just make you want to stay with us all day. And we are honored. Here it comes to share a special message. This special message is from Judge Edwin Cameron. Judge Edwin is a
Good day, comrades, allies, friends, and close people. I honor Gender Dynamics today. I honor its founders. I honor its members. I honor all those who have supported to it. I have been in touch with Gender Dynamics since I met Liesl Theron in the mid-2000s. I spoke at your annual general meeting on a rainy Cape night in 2013, and there was a very good turnout despite the rain and the cold. From the start, trans men and trans women have been at the forefront of the struggle for dignity on the grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity. So too, Gender Dynamics has been a focal part of the struggle in South Africa. I wish you well. I congratulate you. I wish to extend my respectful pride to you and thank you for all you have done. May you continue to do so for long time.
Thank you so much, Judge Edwin Cameron. I was still trying to introduce who he was, who he is, but studio wanted me to move in that direction, and it is still good. That was a very powerful message from Judge Edwin Cameron. For those of you who don't know him, he's a towering figure in South Africa's human rights and constitutional justice landscape. He has worked alongside many of our struggles as an ally, advocate, and a voice of conscience. He has witnessed the evolution of gender dynamics, and that is why it is not surprising that we have Judge Edwin Cameron, who has had the same effect on the rest of the continent of Africa. Please let me have these two executive directors back. Two executive directors, one legacy, many voices. Liesl Theron, founding executive director of Gender Dynamics, and Liberty Matthyse, the current executive director of the organization. Now let's dive deep into this. We are talking about two generations. We are talking about two executive directors. We are talking about one story, one legacy. And for that matter, we will start from where Gender Dynamics came from. How did Gender Dynamics start? And it makes no sense not to bring the first executive director to respond to this question. And Liesl Theron, where does Gender Dynamics start from? How do we get to Gender Dynamics? Please take. Oh, before we start, I'm so sorry South Africa, Southern Africa are two confusing words or names of regions to so many people. Liberty, do you mind for those of our friends who are not sure which is which? What is South Africa and how different is it from Southern Africa?
Well, definitely, Victor. So South Africa is a country in its own right at the southern point of the African continent. And then, of course, Southern Africa is the region in which South Africa is based. And at the moment, it is very much the type of countries that we are speaking about is those that are defined as Southern African countries by the Southern Africa Development Community. And so, yeah, so the one is regional and the one is a country. GDX is based in the country, but GDX also works across borders in Southern Africa.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure our viewers who didn't know now know. Liesl Theron, back to you. We're going to talk about or listen to you as you talk about the beginnings of gender dynamics. Please take the stage.
Thank you for that opportunity, Victor. So what I want to do is I want to actually indeed take us right back from the beginning where it started, maybe even moments before it started. But right before all of this, I want to start by explaining to the viewers of today that we will note that some people maybe on photos are a little bit blurred on their faces, or sometimes we will just refer to a person by their name, not full details, and that is on their request. This is due to the political times we are in. People don't feel completely safe anymore to have all their details out and available. We also had some very prominent people who were really part of Gender DynamiX even before they, let's say, for example, were a staff member or in any various ways. We have people that responded to our request to partake in today's show and that who just said it's not possible for me anymore today. Also, in the case of some people moved on, started having families and young children that are too young yet to explain the whole full story, blah, blah, blah. So we have various reasons why the viewers today will sometimes see only a person's name. But please don't think us and the trans and intersex history in Africa or gender dynamics have any attempts in silencing people. This is just on their request. So therefore, I wanted to put out this disclaimer before the time. In as much as we are an archival website that document history, we also have to be selective. So just for the viewers to understand. And this is really the political times we are in.
Yeah.
Okay. So
thank you, Liesl.
Besides that then, let's start with gender dynamics where it started. So clearly the personal is political. And that was very, very true for me right from the start. Before even myself and my partner of then, Lex, we started Gender Dynamics. Even before, it was already the personal is political. Before I even knew that phrase or understand the importance of that phrase. So that is really the case of Gender Dynamics as well. So I don't know if it's possible for the studio to help us. There is one photo in 2005, before Gender Dynamics had actually its name or were an organization. Myself and that partner of me, we belonged at that years to a church by the name HMCC, Good Hope Metropolitan Community Church. And in those years, actually, myself, I was on the steering committee or the board. I can't remember exactly what is the official name they had. And my partner asked, is there a way you can speak in a board meeting to just tell people I will start taking hormones, I will start looking differently, and ask the board to help silencing the gossips. I don't want drama around me. I just want to have my life. So we had a board meeting, like not special about this, but kind of like we just had in the next board meeting, I mentioned that this is what is going to happen. Mm-hmm. And the board responded and said, yes, clearly, we will obviously support Lex in his transition. Our church is really inclusive, but a counter response came from the board and said, but why not, instead of asking us as board to manage gossips, we won't always hear all the stories on the, why don't we have a workshop? Invite whoever in the community, the church members, or even outside the church for that matter, who want to come to the workshop and Lex can explain and what is happening. So I went back home and told Lex, wow, this is so overwhelming, this response. They actually literally will support us and we can even give a workshop and the rest. Lex also have a counter response and say, but I don't want this to be about me. Let's have co-panelists. Let's have a representation from an intersex person, which at that time was Sally Grass. Let's have a representation from a person that is a little bit more on a non-binary kind of like a spectrum or description. So we had Estienne Smith. Why don't we have a trans woman as well? And there was a person who we don't know name today, as the disclaimer said, but there was a trans woman speaking. And then at that stage, we also had the service provider to kind of like round up the discussion. And for that purpose, we invited Dr. Eve, or that's her public name is Dr. Eve. She's also known as Dr. Marlene Wasserman. And she was also one of the first board members of those years. So therefore, we had this roundabout workshop. Here you can see on the photo, we had like breakaway groups or circles, and then each speaker would have say something, and then there was a few questions to the group, and they could come up with counter questions and understand. So what was envisioned as a 1 2 hour workshop, and we thought maybe 10 people will attend it, this is a Saturday, people's own time. Instead, we had about 40, 50 people attending, and it turned out to be a full whole day long workshop. And as from there, this was in May of 2005. And in July 2005, we actually came up with, we need to have an organization here. One workshop is not doing it. We need to have organization, and Lex and myself brainstormed with some other people, different sources from outside to come up with a name, and that's where Gender DynamiX come from.
Wow, very interesting. That's a very, very, very good background story, and shows where this all starts from. But during that period, 2005, we are hearing of a thriving LGBTIQ movement in South Africa. Why the need?
That is actually a very, very
Gender DynamiX.
That is really a very good question. You're right, because the same as I would imagine to say in any other region in the world, or on the continent, or in the world, there's always this assumption: the LGBT in those years, the LGBT acronym was mostly LGBT. We didn't have Q, we didn't have I at that years, plus or any other letters. So the LGBT, so the assumption in those years, we're speaking of 2005, the assumption in those years, the acronym covers it. So when I, as an organization, whoever I am, put in my funding proposal or put in my report or have a talk show on a radio or wherever I, as the director, or I, as the media person of an organization, speak about LGBT, T is included, right?
Yes.
But then when you ask the people that represents T, if you go to any other organization, where did you find information? And people don't know nothing.
So there was a real gap.
It was really, really a gap. In those years, we still, maybe Gender DynamiX, if you have advocacy or outreach officers and also other organizations, not only Gender DynamiX, I'm sure we hear sometimes that word, especially in the case of people in the rural areas, that will say, I thought I'm the only one like this.
That's right.
Or especially when people now will go back with their story to their childhood years or their younger years or their pre-discovery years. Different people have different paths of when they come out. Some people came out of the womb knowing I'm different, and other people took time, right? But point is, you will hear many times in a person's story, I thought I'm the only one.
Yeah.
But in Gender DynamiX, that was almost the opening starting sentence. There was literally.
I'm sorry, Liesl, just in the interest of time.
Yes.
Do you have any two specific points, as in reasons why then Gender DynamiX?
Yes, I do have.
Yeah.
One reason is in our own personal political story, if I can take it back to that. We want to keep on finding out, but where is, let's say, healthcare? What's the next step? What is the first thing? Haphazardly, we know of a few trans people throughout South Africa, but even in the different provinces, the method of approaching your doctor or your hospital or your clinic is different, right?
Right.
So one of the very first, besides that workshop that we saw the photo of, one of the very first founding reasons or purpose, the missions of Gender DynamiX was, since my partner of then didn't want to be publicly out, that's why we, for many years, just said I was the founder. And then when Lex was comfortable to have his name mentioned,
Yes.
then so people might thought we factored it up, but that's the truth. He was not willing. He was scared that he will lose his job, like so many other trans people. So one of our first founding reasons was, let Gender DynamiX, with this face who is cisgender and have nothing to lose, let me keep publicly the database. Let people tell me, or by email, where did they find hormones, how did they do whatever X, Y, Z, and I will disseminate the information. So I'm the kind of like the contact person, all of these, not putting any trans person at risk, but that. So we actually started out as being a database. That was what we thought for healthcare,
which was very needed.
In its first year, a parent would contact me and say, I think my child is trans. Like, I didn't know, what do I do with this information? I don't know what to tell a parent. And then a person would contact and say, I'm unfairly dismissed at my job. Where can I get legal advice? This is like how it just mushroomed within the first year. And like we realized this need to be a fully fledged organization. So these were
very clear that even if South Africa was already thriving in terms of the movement, LGBT movement, there was a big gap in terms of outreach and services and even advocacy for transgender and intersex persons.
Definitely.
But as you tell this story, I would like to hear something from Liberty. Yes. Liberty, you were not yet in leadership during that time. I wonder where you are. Maybe you will tell us where you are at that time. But when you hear about these early years that Liesl is talking about, the lack of, the gaps and everything, what stands out most for you, and what do you carry, from that humble, I call, foundation of Gender DynamiX, the organization that you lead today?
I mean, I feel so inspired by the incredible work that Liesl, Lex, and the many trans activists and allies at the time did in establishing Gender DynamiX. 2006, I think about 3 years before then, just a trigger warning, I tried to commit suicide whilst being in basic education. And that was because I couldn't come out in a rural town of Darling, that I'm from. As the woman that I am, I sought healthcare support with my mother, and the healthcare services were not sensitized at the time. Basically, letting my mother know that I am there's nothing wrong with me, and therefore I should be reared as a boy child as opposed to the girl child that I knew myself to be. And so this was a couple of years before GDX started, and I think for me, when I eventually moved to the city, fortunately, I had enough support in my community to be able to make it through basic education and be able to be admitted into university. But when I got to university and confronted by the hostilities in that space against gender non-conforming people and trans people, I think at that point in time, we turned to Gender DynamiX. I was also very fortunate to be studying at a university that was based in the same city as Gender DynamiX. And so turned to Gender DynamiX in about 2011, 2012, after a violent incident on campus, and Gender DynamiX was there to come and support to sensitization, education, and
that was in 2011.
That was in 2011.
No, we already. It's very, very obvious that Gender DynamiX has played a role in your life. And have you carried, from whatever Liesl said, have you carried anything?
And no, 100%. I think that there is so much. In as much as the organization has grown in leaps and bounds over the years, the essence of what it does has remained intact, I think, because the realities of our people has not shifted much since 2006. The systemic violence, discrimination, and the stigma that our people experience is ongoing. And so it takes time for society to be able to change hearts and shift minds on particular matters, and particularly within these moments, geopolitical moments where we are experiencing setback in human rights agendas and gender justice agendas. Again, it highlights how important the work is. And so our work remains the same, but scaled to a national level and
Yeah.
also through partnerships across Southern Africa, scaled it within in a regional
Yes, we are
context.
going to go
So
there. I just want people to
okay,
see where you start from and how you get into Africa. But thank you so much for that. I just want to take this moment to honor Lex for what you have given to us as transgender people in Africa and intersex people in Africa. It is very obvious in the story and in the stories of others what gender dynamics, what role gender dynamics has played. I also want to say this is why we call Liesl Mama Trans. She started off there, but she continues to carry the movement, as you'll hear. Now, Liesl, there've been highlights during the time that you were leading gender dynamics. I remember hearing about transgender stories in South Africa when I was there. It was an initiative by Gender Dynamics and probably the beginning of storytelling for transgender people. Could you please tell our viewers and listeners and also friends of Gender Dynamics about this particular highlight?
Definitely.
And if you can make that brief, because Gender Dynamics, we are celebrating you, but you have done so much that we have to talk about.
Definitely. In those beginning years, the South African version of storytelling had two different forms. And both of them was actually in partnership with Gala. One was, I can't remember if it was 12 or 13, 14, a small amount of trans people that we tried to get over from different areas in the country, with one person extremely different rural people with different ages and all of that. And we had a body map workshop. And Gala, it was like almost like a week-long, I think, workshop. It took the members through really making paintings and body maps about themselves. So that was the one storytelling method. It ended up or resulted in being an exhibition. It was quite very vibrant and visual in those years in South Africa for other organizations to understand that trans people have different stories, different lives, a lot of things to share.
Right.
The second bigger and more far-reaching storytelling method that Gender Dynamics and Gala did together was the book that we eventually launched together, I think in 2010. Studio, maybe you can show us a picture of the cover of the book. Some people might remember this book. The book ran out of its first publication, edit print, and had to have a second edit print. The published house didn't want to make a third print. It was too much for them, and eventually ended up on Kindle, on Amazon available. I don't know if it's still available there. But this was the first book on, I think to say, on the continent about, all the different stories, different chapters. There was a chapter in from a mother about a trans child, and there was a brother, and then obviously people with various stories for themselves. You can also see, Studio, there's a photo with 3 people of that book launch, and those 3 people in the photo, if we see it in a short while, was the 3 editors. So here are the 3 co-editors, one can say. On the left here is Charles Marie, who is no longer with us today. And then in the middle is Joy Wellbeloved. I don't want to out-age
That's fine, Liesl.
Joy, but the Joy is very senior today because this was about 15 years ago. And then Ruth Morgan, who was at those years the director at Gala. These were the 3 authors. And then Studio, you can also very quickly slide these 2 other photos. The one photo is a group photo of all the people who contributed a chapter in the book. And then there's so these are some of the contributors. I'm not going to speak about every person, but 2 of the people in this group here is not longer anymore with us today. And then the other photo is of the audience. Again, the published house was saying to us, like normally a book launch has about 30 people. This book launch had about 200 people. It was
very amazing, because I just remembered that I was at this event when I saw the audience.
Yes.
But just to move a little bit further than that, I would like to hear from you why this book why this piece of work was important in South Africa at that time, and in fact, what was the power in those stories?
I think the power of that book, and with its timing being so important, was this was the first time for the general public, really, to have something in their hand
Right.
with, I can't remember the full amount, I didn't count now, but like 15, 16 stories telling from people's hearts. And if you could even look at that photo with the contributors, there were about 2 of the people that were at that stage already in their late 60s. So this was, that would debunk that whole story of it's a passing phase. We always hear this passing phase, you will just sort yourself out. There were also chapters in there from, as I told earlier, from a mother about their child, from a brother about his brother who came out as a trans man. So there was really, and there was also, I think, 2 or 3 in there that is couples. Like these are real life stories. We had the stories to cover a huge amount of diversity by means of people can identify. Like people could see
So
themselves.
it was a very good resource for trans and intersex people themselves, but
Yes.
also the families, the community. It's like meet us. Here we are. We exist, and we are proud. I think that was a very proud moment that I saw in the. And also, Liesl, if you could at some point, if you could confirm that this book is still available on Amazon, we can let people know in another show.
We can let people know in another show, or I can also, when I find this out, both in our YouTube and maybe on the website in the comment section, comment on
yes,
it.
because this is a very great piece, and also probably inspired a lot of people at that time. Liesl, during your period, what other highlight would you like to just talk to us, or highlights very quickly, just to let us know, so that we take this down, but also let people hear the story of that journey of gender dynamics?
Okay, I will definitely. So I think overarching one of the highlights that the Gender Dynamics had was really our awareness, our workshops, our trainings, where we really shared with community members, sometimes within the spaces of the other LGBT organizations, invited them and their communities or constituents over. So really one of our angles was within the, if I say the so-called happy LGBT, because we had to fight our space in being actually recognized as the T.
Right.
So many of our workshops were actually at or with in partnership. You have to take them on board, right? You can't just come in and make, antagonize. So we really had to like always have a collaborative, let's hold a workshop with your members. But actually then we know we are the ones telling the story, right? So we had many of those. And I want to reflect back in a video clip. If studio can help us, there was one community member who literally came out and came forward by means of attending one of those workshops. We have actually 2 examples like that.
So these were workshops. These workshops were in Cape Town, where Gender Dynamics
across the country, not only in Cape Town.
Okay.
So one such a reflection I want to give back, and this is an activist, a person that we know today in other capacities. But studio, can you show us the short video clip of Whitney?
Hi everyone, I go by the names of Nangipa Whitney, Juanita, Sindiswa, Lerato, Nomaniwa, Basetsana, Ruvarashe, Mabasen, Boysen Spielman Kumalu, Gutsias Stein, Sitole. Better known as Whitney or as Basetsana. I am a post-op transgender woman from Liesl, a rural area in the Western Cape of South Africa. I got first in contact with Gender Dynamics through self-discovery workshop that was organized by the Triangle Project and Gender Dynamics back in 2006, when I was struggling with issues regarding my gender identity and sexual orientation. At that workshop, I met Liesl, who is the founder of Gender DynamiX, and also I met a lot of other trans people there, which was very informative. It was an eye-opener for me. So one of the people at the workshop have kept in contact with me, and they have fed me with information on transitioning etc. Fast forward, I started to work for Gender DynamiX as the outreach coordinator in 2011. And from there, things were just get very easy for me in order for me to access trans health, specific healthcare. So the organization not only give me a job, but they also give me the opportunity to be in contact with, with health service providers, which is not easily accessible in the rural areas where I'm coming from. So this is my little piece of my reflection on how I met the organization and what the organization did to me as a trans person. Thank you.
That is so great, the way how Whitney took us back to memories of long ago. I have another person who also attended a workshop, and I think that this workshop was actually in Gauteng, maybe at the Out organization in Pretoria. And Studio, if you can also play us the reflection that we have from somebody by the name Katricia.
Hi, my name is Katricia Rachel Natalie. I would love to say Gender DynamiX helped me a lot since I met with them in 2008 or 7 over there. And they were very amazing. They were very caring. They helped me throughout my transition. They even helped me to find the doctors who can do that for me. We went to Cape Town in Grooterskloof, and then I was fulfilled. Even their workshops helped me to go through everything. And I would love to say to them, thank you, Gender DynamiX. GDX for life. I love you guys. I appreciate you. Don't ever back off. Help the others through their journey. That is what we are here for. Thank you.
Yes, Liesl.
Yes, yeah, we are. So I really think that these reflections from community members show us how it was important for people to just attend workshops. Victor, you asked if there were some of the accomplishments of Gender DynamiX, the big things. There are 2 ones, actually 3. There are 2 that I still want to mention. One is, and I know that Liberty will also talk later more about it, because it was really one of the accomplishments, but many of them started early and keep on going. It's like, how do I say, the gift that keep on giving, right? Mm-hmm. So in 2010, we had what we called at that time the pre-health conference. That was a small health conference, the health advocacy research conferences as they are still known today. But the pre-health conference was in 2010. Only 40 people attended in Houtpijn. And the model we had that, and I think the very first few health conferences was building on that same model, where about 50% of the people are community members and the other 50% are service providers across various different kind of medical access points, endos, surgeons, therapists, HIV care, whatever. So we always wanted to have, especially in those first ones, a very good balance. It was also a space where trans people and medical service providers could be for 2 or 3 days within each other's space, eat in the same dining place, whatever, and just break the ice of, there's this hierarchy between the so-called patient and provider, right? So that conference, and especially I think for trans people, that can even be a bigger, hierarchy between people because of that barrier. Like, my whole life is depending on what my next doctor visit is going to tell me. So I have a reflection of a person that attended that first pre-conference. That was also actually her first moment of discovery. However, she could, in that raw, new way of getting information, contribute to the healthcare providers there. Like, this is how work should be modeled and what we are thinking through. So I want us to look at a reflection given by somebody by the name Liesl.
Hi everyone, my name is Letikukanya Letitia Sishi. I'm from Durban in a township called Umlazi. That's where I was born, bred and buttered. I have been with Gender DynamiX since 2010 when they helped me understand who exactly I am. When they first invited me to the first trans conference where I have learned a lot about me. I'm still transitioning with them. It's been a fruitful journey and I am so happy and looking forward to work with them again. And also it has strengthened me to be able to have community dialogues and community engagement and seminars for the trans community in my province. I play a big role. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Liesl?
Yes. So then I think we have, in the time period that I covered, two more very important, how can we say, outcomes or things that Gender DynamiX played an important role on. And these 2 points now start reaching a little bit into the region as well, not only South Africa. One of them is definitely the way how Gender DynamiX was contacted by or supported persons who wanted to claim asylum, being refugees in South Africa, trans people from other countries. Some of them who in the beginning years would frame the reason for wanting to be in South Africa only based on safety as the reason fleeing their country. And later on, it became also very clearly that people needed to access healthcare, various forms of healthcare. So people would come from different countries. We had, I think the very first person we helped, her name, I'm just going to say her name was Alexandra. She came from somewhere in East Africa. And it was so interesting the way how we as Gender DynamiX got into supporting this very first person that we knew about as being a refugee. In those years, and Victor, you will know Carrie Allen Johnson. In those years, Carrie Allen Johnson worked as the African specialist based in New York for what we know those years, Eagle Herc. But Eagle Herc is today known as Outright International.
Right.
So here I am, it's a 2006 or 7, still minding my own business and just being a small, innocent little girl thinking she started Gender DynamiX as a database, remember?
Mm-hmm.
I got this phone call and on my phone, it showed up as an international number. And I was like, so, oh my word, somebody's calling me from international. You know, like we speak of overseas, right? Like,
right. Mm-hmm.
So here calls this person and it was Carrie Allen Johnson. And he said, I'm aware of this person that needs to come from East Africa to South Africa. The way how it works with refugees, we cannot help them making the trip. Because when that person have to go and open their case and claim their asylum, they need to be able to demonstrate how they independently themselves decided to come to South Africa and landed, ended up being in South Africa as the country they want. So we can't help. The moment that person will contact me and say, I'm in the borders of South Africa, can I call you back and ask from here on you can help us? Mm-hmm. I had no idea what this is all about. This was 2006 or 7. I had no idea. I said to him, but she's trans, right? And he said, yes. I said, well, then the moment she's in South Africa, we have to help her. She's part of the community we serve as Gender DynamiX.
Right.
I don't care where she comes from. He was relieved and so happy because he did ask a few of the other more established, bigger LGBT organizations, and no one was able or willing to take this on board. I said, listen, you have to guide me. As you can hear clearly, I have not really much idea of what I'm saying yes to. Mm-hmm. We will do it. So she was the first person we helped, and then there was quite a few others, and now it's quite regular that we will see it, and across the board many LGBT organizations will help trans refugees. But so I would like to say that I really do think that was important. The other one, and I have a video to share here, is Gender DynamiX in partnership with CIPIT, based in Uganda, as also the first intersex organization on the continent. The two of us organizations came together, and one of the biggest results of that collaboration was that we started with the exchange program. The exchange program ended up over 3 years, the year of 2010, 11, and 12. There was 3 years of that. 16 activists from 8 countries. And we have a video clip of one person that was a participant who want to share what was for them the value of being a participant in the exchange program. Let's hear about Pepe.
Hey GDX, happy 20th, happy birthday. My name is Pepe Wanjima. I am from Uganda. I work with sexual minorities Uganda. I would like to reflect just a little bit on the exchange program that GDX had 15 years ago that left a profound impact on my life as a trans person living in Africa and living in Uganda amidst all the hostility. Being part of the exchange program, one of the things that stood out for me was the storytelling bit, where we produced videos, from scratch, from writing our stories and then producing, turning those stories from paper, sort of like having our script and then making the actual film, producing it together with Shelley. And we ended up also getting like awards for that. So the storytelling was really, really profound for me, because our truth can only be told through sharing our stories, and that has remained a very profound part of my life. And I thank you for that, because I'm able to stand and I'm able to speak and be proud of who I am and continue to live on this continent because of the empowerment, because of the knowledge and education that I got during that time, that really made me, that instilled confidence in me. So happy birthday, and I'm happy that we are still in contact.
And that is happy birthday to Gender DynamiX from a recipient or somebody, a beneficiary of that project that you're talking about. Did you have anything else to say about that project, or should we go into?
Let's continue, because we can talk forever. So we rather have to continue and move on.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that bit. You clearly did a lot, and I know that there's not even enough time to just talk about the work you did in all those years. But let's talk about expansion and strategy right now. And Liberty, this is where you come in very, very strongly. We turn the page, because that is going to be your era. You stepped into a legacy, as you have had. You stepped into a legacy, but also the landscape in which this legacy was situated, well, it is ever changing. Things keep changing. Everything keeps changing. So what kind of gender dynamics then did you inherit, and what did you feel called to protect or transform?
Certainly, Victor. Thanks, Liesl, for sharing that backdrop of where it all started and how it grew over the years.
Yes.
I think that we and myself continue to draw a lot of strength from that. I think a big catalytic moment for the organization was probably when there was a change in leadership, and it went from allied-based leadership to community-based leadership. And I think that happened in about 2014 with Pooh coming in, and subsequently Ricky Jositao taking over, and then of course myself coming in as a trans woman, at the time identifying as a gender non-conforming person, and of course affirmed myself over the years. And so I think that was very much a turning moment. And I think the fact that the organization is still standing after so many years, after that transition, means how we it really speaks to our resilience as an organization, our strength as an organization. I think it's a very proud moment to note that as trans people, we can do it for ourselves, by ourselves, and with each other and allies as we are pushing forward on a human rights centered and social justice agenda. And so
Right.
I think I really draw a lot of strength in terms of that type of approach to organizational work and leadership. I think in terms of the work that we've done, it really has more from only looking at specific individuals within particular locations to really asking the question, if we really want to make change happen for our communities, how can we make it happen for all of our community members, regardless of where they are? I'm a transgender woman from a rural area, from a rural town. And so for me, coming into the leadership role, it was very important to
Yeah.
bridge the gap that exists between urban-based access to service and
Yeah.
services for rural-based communities. And so I think that then brings into focus the system in which our lives are pegged and the systems that define our lives. And so one key system was, of course, the system on legal gender recognition
Yeah.
and our
I see that
continued
strategy beginning
advocacy.
to expand now.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
expand in context of legal gender recognition,
Right.
becoming more focused around systems change work in context of healthcare to push
Hmm.
the health agenda. And I mean, here we are now pushing for a law reform process that is based on gender self-determination. We are
As I
pushing
was,
for a
sorry for interrupting you. As I was going through some of the work of Gender Dynamics, I've seen a lot of involvement, in that legal aspect as you're discussing. Could you please tell us some of those specific uh, cases that you could call highlights for Gender Dynamics on that journey? Because your strategy is now moving to policy reform.
100%. And
Yeah.
our strategy basically focuses primarily on three disciplines. So we are looking at making changes within the system on identification, registration, and management, legal gender recognition in short for trans people. We are looking at the health system in terms of devolving or decentralizing access to gender affirming healthcare from tertiary healthcare level to your secondary and primary healthcare facility. So a trans person should be able to go to a clinic in their community and ask, can I get my hormones? And the clinic should be able to say, yes, we are here to support you. We are here to affirm you. And that needs to be across the board. That requires policy changes. That requires budgeting changes within our fiscus in order to make that access possible for our communities. And then, of course, we're working within the education system. So initially, we had started in the basic education system, and then we asked ourselves the question, can we really affect change within the basic education system? And we said no, because we will never be able to do that change at scale. There are far too many teachers, there are far too many institutions of learning across the country that we will not be able to reach because we are not set up to deliver that work at scale. And so what we then made, we made a strategic decision to say that we are going to start targeting higher education institutions. These are the institutions that are tasked with training the next generation of professionals. And so we started signing memorandums of understanding, made agreements in order to come in to train social workers, teachers, lawyers, healthcare practitioners, etc. And to date, we have probably trained between 2017 and now, we've trained over 3,000 pre-service practitioners that is now going to be sent out, hopefully within the sphere of work. And so for us, it's really about doing the systems level change by partnering with systems, by partnering with government, whilst at the same time holding government accountable to
Mhm.
what it needs to deliver as services and how it needs to give access to human rights realizations for our communities. So a lot of our work currently in those three spheres is really about positioning gender dynamics as a technical partner to other institutions that can roll out the type of change we want to see at scale within our particular context. GDX has we have always prided ourselves on the fact that we are most active within South Africa, and that we don't go into other Southern Africa or African country context and profess to do the work there. We work in partnership with organizations that are led by the community and allied to our community that knows how to do that work. And so we really leverage our position within the continent, within the sub-regional context, in being able to generate opportunities for partnership-based work, whether that is on research, like we have seen on our Tirelitsa research study that has now concluded. We have led that with about 15 in-country partners across Southern Africa. We have reached we have reached 648 trans and gender diverse persons across the region who have spoken about their experiences. And that data, that evidence is now going to support us in being able to build more solid advocacy agendas to hold our governments accountable. So that is really where GDX is at. I just want to perhaps touch on the last point, not the last point, but on another point around the databases that Liesl spoke about earlier on, and how we have now shifted in a hyper-digital era from the manual databases, for example, to a digital repository of information on a system that we call an app, a digital app that we call LIRA, which is short for Linkages Information Referral App, which is an innovation by Gender DynamiX. And what it does, it uses a GPS coordination system to link service seekers to service providers. And of course, it kicks out information about your top 3 or your top 5 closer service providers that you can go to in order to get access to health services, including HR hormonal replacement care. And so I think in a way, a lot of the work continues, but a lot of the work has morphed into the digital era in a way that can keep in touch with the needs of communities within this digital era. And of course, more of a localized type of response to a systems-focused response, where we know we don't just want to create change for a few, we want to create change for as many trans and gender diverse persons as we can, and that means shifting systems, shifting laws, shifting institutions for access.
Wow. Thank you so much. That is a lot of evolution for this organization. Liesl, how do you feel about this evolution? Like as somebody who founded this organization together with Lex, how do you feel about this evolution and the direction that Gender DynamiX has taken?
I really think it is exciting and moving forward. The fact that Excel sheet manual database converted into an app that connects you with the GPS of where you're located are in.
Right.
I mean, this is fantastic. When I was last time in South Africa in 2023, supporting Gender DynamiX with the conference of that time, I've heard about this exciting news of LIRA. So, I think it's also important to say that Liberty and I have a very close and nice working relationship.
Right.
So I'm really literally, Victor, you say I'm Mama Trans. I'm literally a proud mama.
You're a proud mama.
The organization continue doing, I'm really so happy.
Yeah.
And I really would like to hear more of the things. I know Liberty also spoke of some legal court cases. So yes, I'm proud. I want to hear it. Tell us, share us. Take us away, Liberty.
Also, I had asked Liberty earlier on about the court cases, because those are very key moments, not just for South Africa, but for all of us in terms of precedence. And what did you achieve with them? And then we see how the rest of us move forward with that.
100%, Victor. Just before I touch on the cases, I must also share another highlight for us. And of course, again, showcasing growth in 2023, Gender DynamiX was able to purchase its own offices now. And so I think that makes us even more sustainable as an organization. And that purchasing of the office was also a political act, right? In a city such as Cape Town that has a very deep and profoundly violent history of white, racialized, monopoly capital type of agenda that has played itself out at the expense of people of color for an organization that is now led by people of color predominantly. It's a big political, I think, message that we have sent that we are not going anywhere and that we are here to defend the trans agenda, not just within Cape Town, but also within South Africa and across the broader context that we form part of. And so I think that we hold with a great deal of gratitude at this point in time, and may it serve many more generations of people will come in service of gender dynamics to take this mandate forward. In turning to the cases that we have been leading, I mean, we have none of the work that we do alone. We have always been supported by incredible donors, by incredible partners, whether that is in the international arena with organizations such as Outside International, or whether that is at a more localized level with our local community-based organizations, or across the Southern African region with Southern Africa. We always move together. That is always the intention for how we build relationships as gender dynamics. In addition to that, I think that the cases have also been testimony to that. So, for example, when we are looking at two landmark judgments in South Africa, both cases, Gender Dynamics joined as amicus, a friend of the court that provided some context on the lived experiences of trans people. So by no means do we take credit for it. We really pride ourselves at having been part of the change-making processes in that context. These cases were led by Lawyers for Human Rights and by Legal Resources Centre, our law clinic partners in South Africa, and by profoundly courageous trans people who was willing to turn to the courts for legal resolve. So the first case was really around a case called KOS versus Minister of Home Affairs. Right. This was a case where the Department of Home Affairs subjected trans people to forced divorces under the very fragmented marriage law system within the country. And I don't know if Lisa recalls, but in 2014, when I first attended the Trans Health Conference, I presented this actual paper. And so I was very, not surprised, but it was heartening to see how the matter then became before the courts to be adjudicated as a legal issue, because that's a photo of us in front of the court, the Cape Town High Court, the Equality Court. And so in the case of KOS, the parties won the case, we won the case, and then the obligation was placed. The High Court found that the actions by the Department of Home Affairs to nullify marriages or ask parties to undergo forced divorces by committing perjury in a court of law was both unlawful and unconstitutional, and therefore placed the burden on the state to have to correct those administrative errors and reinstitute the status of the marriage as if there was never an interruption. In addition to that, that was in 2017 when that case was won. And the leader of that case was really Lawyers for Legal Resources Centre and the parties involved. That was anonymized. Then there was a second victory in 2019 with the September versus Subramani case. A very brave transgender woman that found herself incarcerated, then turned to the Equality Court and said, I have the right to have my gender identity respected and upheld, even though I'm serving a sentence. And so you will address me by my pronouns. You will allow me to wear women's clothing. You will allow me to wear makeup. You will allow me to affirm myself within this space. The representatives on this matter was Lawyers for Human Rights. And again, the Equality Court in the Western Cape upheld her rights, and we won that case. And so these two landmark cases have really changed the fabric of the right to gender identity in South Africa quite profoundly, and it has far-reaching consequences for what that means in terms of government's obligation in upholding constitutional right to gender and gender identity by extension thereof. And so I think for us, we continue to further build momentum on legal gender recognition. We might turn again to the courts, this time potentially in a different capacity, in being able to shift the needle for change for our community members. So those are two of the big landmark cases. I'm not going to speak about some of the things that we have in the pipeline. We don't want to give our strategies away too much on a public platform, but there are other things that's coming. And so we are hoping that the community, our international allies and partners will again be there to support us as we are challenging the system in order to bring about change for our people.
Wow. Thank you so much. I've also enjoyed looking at seeing some of those pictures. Yes, thank you for bringing even more for us. And as you show those pictures, Liesl or Liberty, what are those ones about?
So those pictures are really the ones that were projected before it was us in front of the High Court. Those were the court cases. This one that we have now on the screen is really a watershed moment in a sense that happened, I think, in 2021, where there was a EU-SA dialogue that took place. And to the credit of our partners at Iranti, that was a core anchor of the space. And then, of course, we were able to partner with them and others in being able to convene this conference in South Africa. This space specifically was about bringing the EU, the European Union officials playing a role in bringing our South African officials to the table from the Department of Home Affairs, from the Department of Health, and say, listen and work with civil society, hear civil society out in terms of what they see as progress on this particular front. And so there were many commitments made by government, Department of Justice and Correctional Services, Home Affairs, Health, around how they would commit to the change agenda. The unfortunate part is government did not keep their promises. They have not kept their promises, and now we are left in terms of taking different types of actions in ensuring that government does honor its accountability measures that it must put in place for us as community members within this particular context. And so, yeah, I'm not going to give too much away. That was a big dialogue for our country, a landmark moment. But the work, these spaces are just, it's landmark spaces. They are big spaces. But to the credit of the teams behind the work and the communities continue to do the work, most of it is actually done beyond these landmark spaces. Yeah. And so we end up saying that this is a landmark moment, this is a big moment, and we end up forgetting sometimes the amount of work that really goes into holding government accountable to the commitments that they've made within those particular spaces. That is where the real hard work lies. And we as GDX, we remain committed to doing that hard work with our partners in South Africa.
Right, and you talk about partners. Both you and Liesl, as you took us down this 20 years of work, of a legacy, you mentioned partners. You talk about the power of partnerships. In your 20 years, both of you, are there organizations that you would like to recognize, since today is a celebration, that that it's safe to mention, that are safe to mention because of what you shared with us earlier, Liesl, about safety and all that? Are there organizations that you would like to recognize during this celebration for the partnerships you've had with them?
I think for my end, definitely. I think that this time around we can start at where we are and then move down memory lane. I think that I've already mentioned a couple. Lawyers for Human Rights, Legal Resources Center, Outside International, amongst others. And then, of course, I think another big moment for us was the ILGA World Conference that took place in Cape Town in 2020, last year actually. Oh, it was the biggest, I think. It was a heavy lift for GDX, and I know for Iranti as well. We were the local host that won the bid to host the conference, and it was the first time that we came back to the African continent in more than 25 years. And so I think credit goes to ILGA for working with us and for bringing the conference back to the African continent. in addition to that, I think that there were many other partners that were very instrumental around accountability processes that as we continue to work with
Yeah.
Triangle Project locally, in terms of our broader base of partnership across Southern Africa through the Southern Africa Trans Forum, all the members and the Southern Africa Trans Forum as an entity that continues to hold us, our higher education institutions that we work with, and then of course our counterparts across the continent as well. There are really too many to mention,
That is
Victor.
right. But I know that there are these, even during as you go through the highlights, both of you have mentioned organizations, we partnered. So I just felt maybe you would mention.
If people can feel free to visit our website as well. There are so many resources on the website,
Yeah.
and of course within those resources we also recognize our partners. Just a last note, perhaps, is the partnership model for GDX, at least from my memory and understanding,
Yeah.
under this period, really came full circle or be very much strengthened at the heart of a global crisis, at the heart of COVID-19, where we had nowhere else to turn as trans and gender diverse persons. And when we realized that if we don't have each other's backs, not just in South Africa, but across the region, no one else is going to have our backs. And that really solidified the ways in which we were able to come together and rolled out what was known as the COVID-19 regional response, where we were able to share financial resources, share commodities, share other forms of support and resources with one another to keep ourselves safe from the COVID-19 pandemic in the more physical sense through masks and PPE, but also through the more organizational sense through small amounts of funding that we could share with one another just to keep the engine going through a very tough time.
Wow. So that from this model policy comes and the researches that came with it comes after, it only starts after COVID-19.
It starts after COVID-19 because, as Liesl said earlier on, that we had the Trans Health Conference, the biannual Trans Health Conference that was started under Liesl's tenure, continues to this day to happen every second or third calendar year. But in COVID-19, it was a little bit of an anomaly. It was very challenging. And so we couldn't really meet in person. And so the conference, as opposed to being a regional conference and more into a national South Africa type of conference for those who could be in the space. And so it took the shape of an education conference to advance education rights. And out of that education conference, with all of the higher education institutions being in the room, student representative councils, students, learners, teachers, and lecturers being in the room, came the model policy framework, which is really a benchmarking tool that we have developed as Gender DynamiX around the inclusion of trans and gender diverse persons within education. And we are now using it as a scorecard, basically, to score with institutions how well are they doing around infrastructure development, policy development, curriculum reform and transformation, professional standards reviews, and values-based, human rights-aligned curriculum that needs to be shaped to support our people within education spaces. So that was birthed out of that conference as the model policy framework.
Wow. Liesl, somebody told us in the comment section that the book is still available on Amazon. You will talk about it a little bit more just now when you unmute yourself. And also, I was just wondering if Gender DynamiX has any other publications from either eras, even if it's just a research that has the knowledge that many people actually need.
Okay, so I can quickly take it away. I'm glad to hear that the book is still on Kindle available on Amazon. I'm not going to talk much more about the book.
Yeah.
People who nowadays access the book have to also read and understand that book in the time it was coming from. In
Yes.
those years, trans language was quite different.
Right.
And in those years, more privileged people almost only had internet at homes.
Right.
So we have to read that book and the
Yeah.
storytellings in a different understanding. And let me just leave it there.
Before you leave it there,
Yes,
please tell them again what that book is called as they search for it.
transgender life stories or South African life. Yeah, there it is. Thank you so much. And you can
Okay.
also maybe note down the 3 authors. It's easy also to search it under the 3 author names.
Thank,
Transgender life stories from South Africa.
thank you very much. Yes, go ahead, please.
So
So
yeah,
I think in terms of some of the more recent publications, again, people can feel free to visit our website at www.genderdynamics.org.za. And looking at, I'll paste in the chat box as well. But there's some of the more recent publications is really the Rural Trans Narratives book that was published that highlights the experiences of rural-based trans people and their challenges in terms of access to services. Um, Secondly, we've got our legal gender recognition position paper that outlines our commitment to advancing that at a systems level. We also recently launched the findings of the regional research study called Cyrillica to be safe. But as we spoke about earlier on, documenting about 648 people's experiences of gender-based violence and systemic violence across the region. That will be published in this year still, and we have our partner Outright International that has again been instrumental in supporting us with that particular project together with the Ford Foundation. And then, of course, we've got other pieces of work that is our annual human rights report that documents the human rights violations experienced by trans people. That has been documented since 2022. So there's about 3-4 reports out already. So people can feel free to visit our website and get access to those resources.
Well, thank you so much. For those of you who would like to know more about Gender Dynamics and the work that they do, www.genderdynamics with an x.org.za. Now, for the two leaders together, being led by the current executive director. Those who just joined us, we have two executive directors here. One, the founding executive director of Gender Dynamics, and the other one is the current director or executive director of Gender Dynamics. So it's two directors, one legacy that we are talking about, and amazing work that they have done not only for South Africa but for the whole region of Africa. The two of you together, being led by you, Liberty, who is current right now, what does the future look like for trans rights in South Africa? But because your work goes beyond those borders, trans rights in Africa.
I think the future really is about trans people being able to self-actualize and really become the fullest versions of themselves, reach their fullest potential as human beings to be able to form part of the centers of society to drive change and possibility for who we can become as a continent, as an inclusive continent, as a continent that celebrates difference and diversity and doesn't see it as a weakness. It's really about trans people standing in our power, holding space for one another, but also holding space for the communities in which we exist and being able to lead from that front. It's about inspiring hope. It's about inspiring joy. It's about being with each other. It's about holding each other. And I think that that really, for me, is a values-based approach in how we want to move forward. Never alone, always together. Never from a position of weakness, but always from a position of strength, because no matter how dire the circumstances might look, we still can hold on to hope, because tomorrow is still going to be a brighter day if we do what we need to do to hold space as community members and as allies supporting community members in all spaces. this moment that we are currently moving through, it's a difficult moment. This anti-trans, anti-gender, anti-human rights, anti-science, anti-fact moment. It's a difficult moment for us to move through, but it's not impossible for us to transcend. And we hold on to that as to great possibility for what futures, beautiful futures, we can create together.
Liesl, in the same spirit, and thank you so much, Liberty. In the same spirit, Liesl, first off, starting with, did you imagine gender dynamics to be what gender dynamics is? Back in the day, 2005, those first years, did you imagine that? Number two, if you were to write a letter to gender dynamics 20 years from now, because we're starting another 20 years, that is 2045.
Oh no.
What would you say to gender dynamics in 2045? What is your message for the future?
Okay, thank you for that double question. The first part of your question is, did I imagine this in 2005?
Yes.
And I don't want to straightforward, just very cheesy say yes.
That's fine.
But but I think one very small important part that we left out, and I will make use of this question of you right now in that, is not so much only what was my founding reasons for gender dynamics at that times, but also what was me as Liesl Theron's reasons for leaving gender dynamics.
Okay.
And the answer of Liberty is actually complementing the reason why I left gender dynamics. Because I was reflecting, I was once in a vacation in a nice quiet spot, and that was about, I left gender dynamics in 2014. But about a year before that, I started preparing myself and the organization and the board for my leaving. And it came because I reflected and I said to myself, funders set it up this way, organizations, expectations, community members, everyone see gender dynamics as the leader, definitely in South Africa and partly in the continent regarding trans advocacy. And I reflected on my position. So therefore it means at that moment, I'm the leader of this organization that leads the region. It leads the movement. And as long as I stay in that position, I shoot in the foot the chance that I had in the founding reasons. And the founding reasons was that trans people advocate one day for themselves in all the places and spaces available to advocates. And as long as I hold that space, a trans person won't lead. So I have to step down for a trans person to lead the organization, to lead the movement, to lead the conversation forward. And I'm so glad with Liberty and leadership today, not saying, but I mean, we know that there was 2 other directors in the interim, but we speak today about the 2 of us. I'm glad that my vision I had in leaving is carrying forward. That it is now trans people holding that spaces, holding the conversation. And actually right now, gender dynamics sometimes really step into leadership, public spaces that is not only concerning trans people, but concerning issues like COVID, like a Department of Home Affairs that is just not stepping up to what people need. So really, gender dynamics hold that space, not only for trans people, but for civil society. And that is actually, I almost want to just be cheesy and say, and I hope that is going to keep on going. You say, I have to have a wish for the next 20 years. Let me not go crazy. This must just keep on going. That's my dream.
You have been very selfless in this movement. We call you Mama Trans for a reason. You did not call us to control us. You have called us from all over the continent to empower us until we say, Mama, we are ready. Mama, we are ready. And you should be very proud because there are so many of us who became strong because we found home in gender dynamics and in your arms. So calling your mama trans by many of the earlier activists is not just a joke or for fun. You used your privilege to create spaces and then left those spaces for us to occupy. And I think that is very respectful, loving, and very selfless. So, Liesl, we will always celebrate you for your bravery, for your vision. Liesl, your vision, don't take that lightly. And your nurturing of so many of us.
And if I could say, Victor, how I remember Liesl, after a violent incident at the University of the Western Cape, where I was at the time, I arrived at the Sarki Bartman Center, and I was sitting. I don't know if it was a green couch or an orange couch in 2011 in that center, and I was just looking at Liesl, Sindiswa, Whitney, Sophia, who then went by another name, moving around in this space. And I was so in awe of all of these individuals that have taken it upon themselves in such a difficult climate to do such important work for the communities. And again, from my end as well, Liesl, please know that the work that you have started with Lex will continue. And there's a new generation of trans leaders that are emerging and have already emerged within the strength that will continue doing this work, perhaps in a different way, but the work will still continue to be done strongly and with intent and purpose.
Thank you so much, Liberty. And Liesl, we just need a program for reflections about Liesl Theron one day for all the activists to come around. Because Liesl, why I said you're selfless and you don't want to be there controlling everybody. Liberty, when I came to South Africa, I didn't know what a peace tire is. I didn't know what binding issues and all that.
I hear you.
I'm sure that Liesl knew these things. But the only thing she could do then, and I really thank you for that, Liesl, because that's what she has done for all the other organizations and individuals, is like, I'm going to introduce you to Lex. I'm going to introduce you to Robert Hamlin. I'm going to, so that the guys show me how, even if she knew, because some of the things were in a bathroom she uses, but she sends me to that one who is just like me, and that is Liesl Theron. And I am not surprised that what she built is still, I can hear it in what you're saying, Liberty. You've taken it further. You've made it bigger, even more professional. And I really think that your vision, you too, Liberty, is a vision that we need as Africa. You have a vision of a certain kind of leadership, trans leadership, and I can hear it in how you speak, in how you want. You have a vision of developing this leadership. So thank you for that fire, Liberty. And we are beginning to see what trans power looks like, and we are very proud of the work that you do. Trans power. You see, I go work with certain people, and then they say we need confirmations from Gender DynamiX. We need signature from, it just feels good. So thank you very much to the two of you. I'm going to leave you for about a minute or two to just give your last words. I know that you kind of gave last words, but I feel there are other last words that need to be left by the two of you, each one of you, to our communities, to trans people across the continent, please, not just South Africa, but also the rest of the continent and probably globally, and to Africa.
Yeah, to Africa.
Yeah.
Liesl, do you want to start?
Okay, I will have my message very short. I'm reflecting on a gender dynamics that started humble in the lounge. It started in an era almost before internet really existed. And people didn't know language for themselves. And I'm looking at when I left Gender Dynamics purposefully with the dedication that this vision I had in those years so long ago, without actually having academic understanding, the nuanced learnings, feminist language. I didn't have that when I started. I just started on what I thought was the right thing to do, right? And I left, as I explained earlier, I left because I saw around me there are more than one trans person that is going to apply for a job description, or for a job advert. So which means it will be a fair process that a few people apply. So I look at that trajectory. I'm speaking now more in an organizational kind of like way. But I also think back of the amount, so many trans people individually, or parents of young ones and parents of older trans children, if I can call it that way, it's their child. I think of what was all around me in those years and where we are today. I only have good wishes. I'm very proud, and I can say with confidence, the way how Liberty also mentioned it, the work will continue, even if it goes in a different way. That is how it is. Growing up children, that is how it is. They go in different directions, right? You might, as a parent, have this vision: my child will be one day a doctor, and then they end up being something else. It is what it is. But I think we have a strong enough movement and community and people with confidence in themselves, knowledge about themselves, that it will continue. And I'm happy. It's a high note, and I'm happy that that is how it is going to be. I believe in it. There's not even no doubt. Even with the challenges that come in these days of political, the anti-gender, it will go forward. Gender dynamics and the trans advocacy, trans movement on the continent will go forward. Liberty,
Thank you so much, Liesl. Thank you so much, Mama Trans. Over to you, Liberty.
I think that there's not much to say besides thank you. I think that thank you to all of the trans and gender diverse persons who affirm self, whether that is publicly or within own space. Every one of us have our own journey, and so continue to do you. Continue to go at your own pace in affirming and asserting yourself in this particular world that we call home. And that is our home. We have a right to be here. Thank you to all of the staff members and community members and allies that have come in service of Gender Dynamics to really drive the mandate on a day-to-day basis. If it wasn't for you, this work cannot continue. This work will not move at an organizational level. Thank you to our board of directors over the years that have also been so instrumental in driving the organization through its different growth phases to where it is now. If it wasn't for that dedicated, inspired, and passionate leadership, we would not have been we would not be where we are today. To our implementing partners, local, across the region, and international, thank you for holding GDX and for continuing to be in our corner. We really are nothing without those partnerships and without that support. And thank you also to our donors and funding partners, community givers who continue to provide the necessary support for us to be able to drive the mandate of the organization. And so I really hope that level of that recognition and that thanks will inspire many more to inspire others to also come in service of the organization to drive the next 10 years of growth, the next 10 years of impact and reach to change lives, to shift hearts, and to shift minds on this particular matter that is so crucial as part of the human rights agenda. Thank you, Liesl. Thank you, Victor, for having me on the show on behalf of GDX. And thank you, Sean, for working in the background in order to make us look good.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Liberty. Viewers, listeners out there, that marks the end of this conversation here on the show. The conversation continues elsewhere, including in our hearts. It was two executive directors, one legacy, telling us the story of Gender Dynamics as Gender Dynamics marks 20 years of existence. So please continue supporting or start supporting Gender Dynamics. Share your story. your reflections with gender dynamics during this period. There are so many people. I could also sit here and start writing about gender dynamics, but let us make it real and send them these stories by email, on their socials. Let's tell them what they have done for our movement and for us individually. Thank you all for tuning into Trans and Intersex History Africa conversations, which happen every Friday, 3 p.m. in West Africa, 4 p.m. in East Africa or most of East Africa. No, 5 p.m. in most of East Africa and 4 p.m. in Southern Africa. Until next time, au revoir. We'll see you later.
Wow.